In a world that tells women to uncover to be seen, imagine a woman who covers to be valued. In today's modern world, the conversation around the hijab often begins with a question: is it oppression or liberation? To some, the image of a covered woman is misunderstood as silence, as though fabric has the power to silence a soul. But to understand the hijab, we must first step beyond the noise of social trends and enter the space of intention, faith, and meaning. The hijab is not merely a piece of cloth, it is a statement, a living act of worship, a declaration that a woman's worth is not measured by what is seen, by the depth of who she is. We live in an age that glorifies exposure and celebrates validation from the outside world. Women are told that empowerment lies in showing more, that confidence is born in visibility, yet the truth is the exact opposite. Real power is not in being consumed by the eyes of others, but in knowing that you define your own worth. The hijab is that definition. It's the courage to say, I refuse to be a product of your gaze. It's the reminder that beauty is sacred, not for display, but for honor. When a woman wears hijab by choice, she is not retreating from freedom, she is reclaiming it. Education teaches us that every act has purpose. In Islam, modesty is not oppression. It is wisdom, a balance between self-respect and societal harmony. The hijab doesn't limit a woman, it liberates her from being seen as a commodity. It teaches the world to value her voice, her mind, her heart, not her physical form. Oppression happens when someone is forced to cover or forced to uncover. True empowerment happens when a woman acts out of her own conviction, guided by her creator and her conscience. The hijab is also deeply spiritual. It reminds the believer that life is not about pleasing the creation, but about seeking the pleasure of the creator. Each time she steps out into the world wearing it, she carries with her a quiet strength, a strength rooted in submission, not to culture or pressure, but to divine command. And this submission, paradoxically, is the greatest form of liberation, because when you surrender to God, you are freed from surrendering to the world. Many think that freedom means the ability to do whatever we want, but real freedom is the ability to say no to society, to trends, to the fleeting desires that demand your identity. A woman in hijab says no to the noise that tries to define her, and yes to her own purpose. She knows who she is, and that self-awareness is the very essence of empowerment. She is educated by her faith, guided by knowledge, and illuminated by intention. So the next time we see a Muslim woman wearing her hijab, let's not ask if she is oppressed. Let's ask if we have been liberated enough to understand her choice. Because the hijab is not a symbol of confinement, it is a symbol of clarity. Clarity that a woman's worth is far greater than the limits of a world obsessed with appearance. It is not a curtain that hides, but a mirror that reflects the soul within. And perhaps the most beautiful truth is this: when a woman wears her hijab, she is not hiding her beauty from the world. She is protecting it, elevating it, and defining it on her own terms. That is not oppression. That is liberation in its purest, most dignified form. In a world where the measure of worth often revolves around how much of oneself can be revealed, the hijab emerges as a quiet rebellion against the superficial standards that dominate modern perception, and in its silence, it speaks volumes. The discussion surrounding the hijab, whether it represents oppression or liberation, stems not from the fabric itself, but from the misunderstanding of its essence. When a Muslim woman chooses to wear the hijab, it is not an act of restriction, but a profound expression of autonomy and faith. A decision rooted in conviction rather than conformity. The modern narrative has conditioned many to associate freedom with exposure, as if the only path to confidence lies in unveiling. Yet, the hijab turns this idea on its head. It declares that dignity and confidence can exist independently of public validation. It allows a woman to reclaim ownership over her body, her image, and her self-worth, reminding the world that her identity is not for consumption, but for respect. The hijab, therefore, becomes more than just a religious obligation. It transforms into a living symbol of inner strength and awareness. It teaches society a lesson about perspective, that liberation is not about the ability to show, but about the freedom to choose, and that true freedom does not lie in doing what the world expects, but in doing what aligns with one's beliefs. To label the hijab as oppressive is to misunderstand the heart of faith itself, for oppression arises when one is deprived of choice, not when one exercises it with devotion. The woman who wears the hijab willingly walks with a calm confidence that radiates from a place far deeper than the surface. Her modesty does not silence her, rather, it amplifies her voice in a world that too often values noise over wisdom. She does not seek to erase her presence, but to define it in a way that aligns with her spirituality. In choosing to veil, she challenges the gaze of a world that has long profited from the objectification of women, and she transforms that gaze into reflection. Through the hijab, she tells the world, see me for my mind, my heart, my purpose, not for the parts of me that meet your standards of beauty. This is not a retreat from empowerment, but its very embodiment. The hijab symbolizes a woman's journey towards self-awareness, her decision to rise above trends, and her courage to embrace values that hold eternal weight over fleeting admiration. It is, in essence, declaration of spiritual independence, a visible sign that her allegiance is not to the shifting expectations of society, but to the timeless guidance of her creator. Every fold of the fabric carries intention, and every choice to wear it is an act of remembrance, a reminder that her value was written by divine decree long before the world began to define her. Through education and reflection, one can see that the hijab's purpose is not to limit expression, but to refine it, not to hide beauty, but to protect it from exploitation. It shields her from being reduced to her appearance and redirects attention to her intellect, her character, and her faith. That redirection is a form of liberation from judgment, from the constant comparison, and from the relentless pressure to fit into molds that offer no peace. When a woman covers herself for the sake of God, she reclaims a kind of spiritual agency that few can comprehend unless they too have tasted faith-driven purpose. Her modesty becomes her armor, not against the world itself, but against the forces that seek to define her worth by anything less than her soul. She walks not hidden, elevated, not muted, but magnified in the eyes of those who truly see. The hijab, therefore, is not a denial of beauty, but an acknowledgement that beauty is sacred, that it deserves protection and reverence. It is not a barrier, but a bridge between the self and the divine, between outer conduct and inner peace. In a society obsessed with visibility, she dares to find strength in concealment, serenity in surrender, and identity in faith. Her choice may puzzle the world, but it frees her from the exhausting need to please it. That is the true paradox of the hijab. What many perceive as limitation is, in reality, the most profound form of liberation. The woman who wears it stands as a testament that empowerment is not born from imitation of others, but from alignment with truth. In her calm defiance of the shallow ideals of beauty, she becomes a beacon of quiet power, reminding every onlooker that liberation is not about how much you reveal, but about how deeply you understand yourself. The idea of the hijab as a symbol of oppression is one of the most common misconceptions of our time, and it arises largely from misunderstanding what freedom and empowerment truly mean when we view freedom only through the lens of worldly expression. Through fashion, physical exposure, or societal validation, we overlook the deeper dimension of what it means to be free. Freedom is not about removing boundaries. It is about choosing the right ones. The hijab represents that choice. For a Muslim woman, the hijab is not a sign of submission to men or culture, but rather to God, who is the source of all dignity and purpose. It is a declaration that her identity is not dictated by trends, media, or the fleeting approval of society, but by the timeless values of faith, modesty, and self-respect. Every act of covering, every piece of fabric, carries with it an intention to rise above being seen merely as a body and to be recognized as a soul. The woman who wears the hijab willingly steps into a world that often misjudges her, and yet she does so with unshakable confidence because her strength comes from within, not from the mirror or the gaze of others. She knows that her worth cannot be measured in likes, compliments, or attention, but in her sincerity before her creator. The hijab, therefore, is not just a physical covering, it is a moral compass, a daily reminder of faith and focus. In a world that glorifies self-display, she chooses self-discipline. In a society that equates progress with exposure, she chooses principle over popularity. Her hijab becomes a statement of self-control in a culture of self-promotion. It represents her ability to say no to objectification, no to societal pressure, and no to being defined by what is visible rather than what is valuable. The courage it takes to wear the hijab in environments that misunderstand or judge it is a testament to a woman's inner strength and conviction. It is not an act of hiding, but of revealing her priorities, her faith, and her refusal to let external standards define her internal peace. In that quiet act of resistance, she finds empowerment far deeper than what any worldly recognition can provide. To understand the hijab is to understand that true liberation begins with self-awareness and submission to truth. It is ironic that many who label the hijab as oppression live under invisible chains of societal expectations, where worth is determined by how one looks, how one dresses, or how desirable one appears to others. In that sense, the modern concept of liberation has enslaved many to ideals that offer no lasting fulfillment. The hijab, on the other hand, offers a woman the power to reclaim her narrative. It teaches her that she is not a product for display, but a being of purpose. It redefines beauty as something that shines from within rather than something to be exhibited. The fabric that covers her hair also becomes a shield that guards her heart, reminding her that her identity is not for sale to the opinions of others. It gives her the strength to walk in confidence without the need for comparison, because she measures herself by a higher standard, her relationship with God. This is why those who wear the hijab with understanding and conviction speak of peace, not restriction. They describe liberation not as the removal of rules, but as the alignment of the heart with divine wisdom. The hijab liberates a woman from the endless cycle of trying to be enough for the world and allows her to be complete for herself and her creator. It nurtures humility without diminishing confidence, modesty without erasing individuality. It does not imprison her voice, but purifies its purpose. When she walks into the world covered, she is not retreating into invisibility. She is stepping forward with a power that does not need validation. Her hijab becomes her armor, protecting her not only from judgment, but from losing herself in the constant noise of societal expectations. It teaches her that self-worth is not something to be performed, but something to be protected. The beauty of the hijab lies in its quiet defiance. It teaches the world that the greatest freedom is not found in showing everything, in choosing what to reveal and what to preserve. It stands as a reminder that true empowerment is not about abandoning values in the pursuit of acceptance, but about standing firm in what one believes even when the world does not understand. In that act of spiritual courage, the hijab transforms from a misunderstood symbol into a profound representation of faith, purpose, and unshakable dignity. When we reflect upon the meaning of the hijab, it is essential to move beyond the surface and understand the spiritual, psychological, and social dimensions that make it far more than just a garment. The hijab is often viewed through a narrow lens, as though it exists only as an external covering. But in truth, it is a manifestation of inner faith and discipline. It represents a conscious decision to live by principles that elevate rather than expose, to find value in modesty rather than material display. In a society that constantly pressures women to meet impossible beauty standards, the hijab becomes a form of self-liberation, allowing a woman to detach her self-worth from societal approval. It gives her the ability to define herself by her intellect, character, and faith rather than the gaze of others. When a woman wears her hijab, she does not do so to hide her identity, but to express it in a deeper, more authentic way. She chooses to honor herself by placing her value in something eternal rather than fleeting, and in that act, she demonstrates one of the most powerful forms of empowerment. The hijab does not strip a woman of individuality. It amplifies it. Each woman who chooses to wear it has her own story, her own reasoning, and her own spiritual journey. Some wear it as an act of obedience, others as a declaration of identity, and many as both. But for all, it becomes a reflection of conviction, quiet statement that strength and beauty need not be proven through exposure. The choice to wear it, especially in societies that misunderstand or criticize it, requires immense courage. It is the courage to stand against judgment, to defy stereotypes, and to embrace one's faith unapologetically. That is not oppression. It is the purest form of self-awareness, a connection between body, mind, and soul rooted in divine purpose. Beyond the personal, the hijab carries profound societal wisdom. It teaches the world to value individuals for their essence, not their appearance. It encourages both men and women to engage with one another through respect rather than objectification. By shifting the focus from the physical to the intellectual and spiritual, the hijab cultivates environments where interaction is based on equality and mutual regard. This is why modesty in Islam is not exclusive to women. It is a principle that applies to all, reminding humanity that true dignity is found in restraint and respect. In this light, the hijab becomes a symbol not of gender division, but of moral elevation. It reminds humanity that liberation is not about the absence of boundaries, but about understanding the wisdom within them. The misconception that modesty suppresses expression arises from a worldview that equates exposure with confidence. Yet the truth is that self-control and modesty require far more inner strength than conformity. A woman who dresses modestly is not rejecting beauty, she is redefining it. She is saying that her beauty is not a tool for attention, but a treasure of her faith. Her hijab invites society to see her as a complete human being, not just a collection of physical traits. It fosters respect where superficiality once reigned. In this way, the hijab is not only a spiritual statement, but a societal remedy, a reminder that empowerment does not mean becoming like men or chasing external validation, but embracing one's identity with dignity, wisdom, and authenticity. Spiritually, the hijab serves as a constant reminder of purpose and accountability. It is an act of remembrance, a form of daily worship that strengthens a woman's connection with her creator. When she covers herself, she does so out of love and reverence for the one who designed her soul, not because she feels inferior, but because she recognizes her sacred worth. Every morning when she places it upon her head, it becomes a renewal of intention, a silent prayer that her actions, words, and presence reflect the values she holds dear. It is this inner consciousness, known as taqwa, that transforms the act of wearing the hijab into a spiritual journey. The fabric that drapes her hair becomes a physical manifestation of devotion, a symbol of her awareness that life's purpose extends beyond the fleeting pleasures of the world. It reminds her to walk with humility, but also with pride in who she is, a woman who has chosen her path not because it is easy, but because it is right. That choice brings peace to her heart and clarity to her mind. The hijab thus becomes a source of balance in a world of extremes, grounding her in a sense of identity that cannot be shaken by trends or criticism. It connects her to millions of women across time and geography who have made the same decision, each of them a living testament to the fact that faith and freedom are not opposites but allies. Through the hijab, a woman learns that true beauty lies in the harmony between outward modesty and inward confidence. It is a beauty that transcends time, untouched by the passing standards of fashion or approval. The hijab is not a symbol of limitation. It is a declaration of liberation, the liberation of the soul from the need to please everyone except the one who created it. In the conversation about women's empowerment and freedom, the hijab often stands at the center of misunderstanding, painted by some as a symbol of subjugation and by others as an emblem of faith and strength. The truth lies beyond either extreme. It is neither oppression nor a mere cultural tradition, but an act of spiritual choice that carries deep moral and personal meaning. The hijab is an expression of a woman's inner world, a reflection of her connection with her creator and her sense of dignity in a society that too often measures worth through appearance. When a Muslim woman chooses to wear the hijab, she does not reject modernity. Rather, she redefines it on her own terms. She chooses to participate in the world while maintaining control over how she presents herself within it. In a world where image has become a form of currency, her hijab becomes her declaration that she refuses to be reduced to her looks. It is her way of saying, I define who I am, and I will not let the world define me. This form of resistance is not loud or confrontational, but powerful in its quiet confidence. It challenges the global narrative that associates visibility with worth and uncovering with progress. Instead, it teaches that true progress begins when a woman is valued for her intellect, her heart, and her purpose. In that way, the hijab becomes a mirror of self-awareness, reminding the wearer and the observer that real liberation cannot be bought through imitation of trends, but must be discovered through alignment with truth. The idea that the hijab is oppressive often comes from a misunderstanding of what oppression truly is. Oppression is not in the act of covering. It is in the denial of choice. If a woman is forced to cover, that is oppression, but so too is forcing her to uncover against her will. True empowerment is the freedom to choose for oneself. A Muslim woman who wears the hijab out of conviction exercises one of the highest forms of autonomy, spiritual independence. Her decision is not dictated by culture or compulsion, but guided by consciousness and faith. In an era when self-expression is often equated with exposure, the hijab offers a radical form of self-expression through restraint. It says that a woman's strength lies not in showing everything, in choosing what to share and what to protect. That choice stems from self-knowledge and self-respect, qualities that are central to true freedom. The hijab also acts as a shield against the relentless pressures of the beauty industry that profits from women's insecurities. It liberates her from being a product of consumption, offering her peace in knowing that she is enough without needing to perform for society's gaze. Her covering becomes a declaration of inner confidence and spiritual alignment. The one who chooses it consciously walks through the world with dignity, carrying within her the serenity that comes from knowing she is fulfilling a divine purpose rather than following a worldly demand. On a societal level, the hijab carries lessons that transcend gender and culture. It calls for a reevaluation of how we perceive respect, modesty, and equality. By promoting modesty, the hijab creates a culture where both men and women are reminded to look beyond appearances and engage one another through intellect and values. It is not about erasing beauty, but about placing it within the right boundaries where it serves to uplift rather than distract. Modesty, in its essence, is not limited to dress. It extends to behavior, speech, and intention. The hijab thus becomes a visible reminder of a holistic way of living, a life centered on humility, respect, and purpose. It nurtures a sense of balance in an age where excess and exposure dominate. It teaches that respect is not demanded through force, but earned through integrity and moral conduct. The presence of a woman in hijab challenges shallow perceptions of modernity and success, urging society to reconsider the meaning of progress. Is progress truly achieved by revealing more, or by understanding one's worth beyond the visible? The hijab answers this question through action rather than argument, embodying the strength of silence and the eloquence of faith. It represents a worldview where the body is honored, not exploited, where beauty is cherished, not commercialized. Through her modesty, the woman in hijab uplifts the conversation about dignity, turning it from a cultural debate into a moral reflection. Spiritually, the hijab connects a woman to a profound sense of purpose that transcends the material world. It becomes a daily act of worship, a reminder that every choice she makes carries spiritual weight. When she wraps the hijab around her head, it is not merely a ritual, it is a conscious affirmation of her devotion and her desire to live a life of meaning. It strengthens her heart against the distractions of the world and centers her identity on her relationship with her Creator. Each time she steps outside, she embodies her faith with quiet confidence, knowing that her actions speak louder than any defense she could give. The hijab is not about covering her beauty from the world, but about uncovering her faith to the world. It grants her peace, not because it hides her, because it allows her to exist authentically without compromise. Her confidence does not stem from visibility, but from conviction. In a society that tells her she must show more to be seen, she finds empowerment in being unseen for superficial reasons and known for her true essence. The hijab, therefore, becomes a bridge between her inner and outer worlds, harmonizing her faith with her daily life. It reminds her that liberation is not found in the rejection of divine guidance, but in its embrace. The woman in hijab walks through the noise of the modern world with serenity, her purpose steady, her values unshaken. In her silence, there is eloquence. In her modesty, there is power. And in her choice, there is the purest form of liberation, a liberation that begins not from the outside, but from within.